Hi, this is about Chapter 9, contractual and title related problems. So let's start with contractual issues. The agreement of purchase and sale um, has contemplates most suitable situations encountered in residential negotiation. However, there can be circumstances, for example, assigning of a contract, obtaining insurance, heritage property, and power of sale. So let's look at assigning a contract. Assignment refers to the transfer of right in a contract, usually in writing, to another party. The general rule of law is that all contracts are assignable, with certain rare exceptions, like person service contracts, which are generally not assignable. The agreement of purchase and sale clearly sets out parties to the agreement. However, circumstances can arise if one of the parties want to assign the contract. As a general rule, liabilities under a contract cannot be assigned by the party obligated, so as to compel the other party to accept performance by an unrelated third party. Um, However, liability can be assigned if the express consent or implied intention of the parties is there to permit the assignment. The court may hold that such intention was implied if the obligation does not provide a special personal qualification, or if it was immaterial that the obligation was performed by someone other than the person originally liable. Rights as opposed to liabilities under the contract can generally be assigned, except where for the reasons of confidence between the parties or personal qualification. There's actions which would increase or change the obligation. Like in the case of seller take back mortgage, the court would not imply an intention to permit an assignment without consent of the seller, because there's a confidence involved, and also there's a personal qualification involved. Assignment by a buyer. If a buyer contemplates assignment of a right to a corporation or other parties prior to the closing, the clause in the agreement of purchase and sale can provide that buyer has a right at any time prior to the closing to assign the offer and release from any further liability in the regards to the obligation under the agreement. The seller should carefully consider this type of assignment as no recourse against the original buyer, as no recourse against the original buyer is possible. This clause should not be used in assignment of a contract when the case of seller take back mortgages. So let's take a look at the assignment clauses. There are various scenarios, like a buyer has purchased a property and now wishes to assign agreement of purchase and sale as a seller to another party. This clause assumes that the buyer, who is now the seller, has the right to assign that agreement. There can also be a situation where a buyer has purchased a standard condominium unit and now wishes to assign agreement of purchase and sale as a seller to another party. This clause assumes that the buyer, who is now the seller, has the right to assign the agreement. A buyer is purchasing a property and wishes to have the right to assign that agreement at his or own as at his or own option. So an applicable clause can be inserted in the offer itself. Also, a builder has sold a home to a buyer and includes a non-assignable provision in the agreement, which which means that the builder's right to grant an assignment, but only with the express written consents. Summaries: right under assignment are generally assignable, subject to certain exceptions. So the legislation should note that some agreement may include a non-assignability clause. Liabilities are not assignable without the other party's prior consent. Expert advice is strongly recommended for all matters herein. Assigning a lease. A tenant may assign or sublet at will without the approval of the landlord, unless the lease stipulates otherwise, or the tenancy is residential and pursuant to the Residential Tenancy Act. Several considerations may apply in the case of a care home under the Act. Provisions concerning residential assignments are covered under the Residential Tenancy Act. Assuming that the lease in question is commercial, is with associated permission to assign, the commercial tenant may transfer all of his or her leasehold interest to the new tenant. However, unless he or she is released by the landlord, the signer remains liable for the lease obligations to the landlord. Of course, the signer may not remain liable if such is specifically set out in the lease act terms. If the tenant transfers something less than the entire interest he or she sublets it, this can be either the subletting or the part of the term or the part of the premises. The tenant remains liable to the lease unless otherwise stipulated in the lease. Once again, the residential subletting is subject to the provisions set out in the Residential Tenancy Act. Most commercial leases contain an express covenant that the tenant will not assign or sublet, or a qualified covenant that would there will not be any assignment or subletting without the prior written notice of the landlord. This clause may further qualify so that the landlord consent will be withheld arbitrarily, will not withhold arbitrarily. In these circumstances, the tenant can apply to the judge to obtain approval for an appropriate tenant who intends to use premises in a reasonable manner. Usually, both tenant and the assignee or the subletter will sign the form agreeing to the bond by both lease, and landlord will consent to this agreement. Obtaining insurance. Clause 8 of the agreement of purchase and sale provides the buyer make inquiries that the principal building may be insured against the risk of fire. Historically, this clause sufficed given few problems in obtaining insurance. These days, insurance underwriters closely scrutinize properties, particularly older homes with outdated wiring, underground oil tanks, or other matters requiring remedial action. And so essentially, the insurance is an agreement wherein one party promises to pay a sum of money to the other if the latter suffers a particular loss in exchange for the premium paid by the insured. Insurance coverage for the real party is two-dimensional, namely the amount of risk covered by a particular property and the range of coverages provided. This type of insurance will vary substantially based on the particular property and the risks involved. In the case of residential insurance coverage is generally grouped under owner and tenant policies. Both types are commonly packaged, that is, various coverages are included within a single policy. Coverages, property and at the part of residential, there are four important aspects. There's a property insurance, there's a liability insurance, there's endorsement, and there's a policy conditions. Property insurance covers what property is being insured against loss or damage, what is not insured, and type of causes of such loss. The range of coverage can vary from basic peril to more comprehensive coverage. Typically, insurance policy wording concentrates on coverage excluded rather than those included. Liability insurance includes specific limits for liability arising out of accident or occurrences as detailed in the policy. Liability can extend to specific personal action liability, premises liability, tenant legal liability, and selected medical payments. Endorsements are additional coverages that is added to the policy to the insurance policy. For example, coverage relating to valuable parts and articles, and policy conditions. The various policy conditions relating to the procedures concerning claim, general policy provisions, and matters addressed in applicable provincial legislations. The commercial, the second type of insurance policy is the commercial one. So commercial policies are structured to provide basic coverages for property insurance and liability coverages with additional endorsement and other policies to meet the needs of a specific business activity. So there will be like a boiler and machinery coverage replacement of all major heating, ventilating, and air conditioning equipments. There can be errors and omission and protection against for the insured if some unforeseeable occurrence develops from the negligence in the operation of the business. A fidelity bond insures them the employer against the act of dishonest employees. Loss of income covers the loss of income suffered by the insured in the event of the damage to the building and resulting disruption of businesses as a result of the damage. Multi-peril risk, combination of fire and liability coverage that generally aligns with the basic structure of the residential package policies. So again, to recap, there's various business, there are various commercial insurance areas like forest and machinery coverage, errors and omission coverage, fidelity bond, loss of income, and multi-peril risk. Insurance requirements for condominium consists of three separate groups: condominium corporation, unit owners, and the renters. The condominium corporation requires insurance for the unit structures, excluding any improvements or betterment made by the owner and the common elements. In addition, the corporation is responsible for liability coverage, any bonding coverage required for employees and director officers, and the director liability. Unit coverage, the unit owners should ensure any improvements and generally any risk cover not covered by the corporation, and renters should ensure that all personal belongings are insured and appropriate legal liability coverages is obtained. Insurers typically provide owner policies for the condominium owners structured on the same general basis as well as residential properties. Tenant policies, tenant package policies are structured for both condominium tenancy as well as rental accommodation. Real estate legislation should note that rental agreement for a condominium may specify the tenant provide coverage for those items owned by the landlord on the premises like and appliances and carpeting. Insurance clause. The Ontario Real Estate Association has developed two insurance clauses to address various circumstances. For example, arranging insurance, and secondly, the not to exceed the specified cost while arranging insurance. Heritage properties. Residents may encounter building designated heritage property. This status can restrict internal and external changes to designated structures and increase the renovation cost. The provincial government has over the years established official measures to record, preserve, and celebrate Ontario's history with particular emphasis on the preservation of structures. Interest in heritage property can be traced back to the early 19th century. From a real estate, so in 1994, Ontario Heritage Act was passed. This act gave municipalities specific powers for the preservation and protection of archaeological resources. A minister's advisor committee on new heritage legislation released its working paper, and then the Ontario Heritage Act came into being. Um, So Ontario real estate perspective, heritage preservation and conservation, while viewed as a public good, can directly affect property and real estate activity. Large blocks of property are set aside by various levels of government and designated as culturally and or historically important. Such activities can at times result in the property owners being deprived of their natural rights. Real estate assistants may encounter buildings or the architectural resources designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. The designation can impact intended use for the property and affect the ability to make both internal and external changes and renovations to structures so designated. Sellers contemplate listing and selling heritage buildings, whether individually designed or stipulated within the heritage conservation district, may face lengthy discussions with the municipal authorities. The following clause highlights that the property user may be designated as a heritage property, for example, designating a heritage property in which the parties have acknowledged that the subject property is or may be designated as a heritage property and is subject to the provisions of the Ontario Heritage Act. The buyer acknowledges that the seller has made this disclosure, buyer accepts as the property with this designation and agrees to continue with this transaction. Ontario Heritage Trust is actively involved in protecting and promoting Ontario Heritage. Ontario Heritage, the trust offers various programs to aid in the restoration of heritage properties. The Ontario, the Ontario Heritage Trust, as the Regency of Ministry of Culture, has various heritage assets. So to recap, the Ontario Heritage Act gives greater municipal and provincial powers to protect heritage sites here. There is the Ontario Heritage Trust, which is the agency of Ministry of Culture, is actively involved in protecting and promoting Ontario heritage. Municipal Heritage Committee assists and advances Municipal Council on local heritage matters. And there is a Conservation Review Board, which conducts hearings and makes recommendations regarding the heritage matters. Key statutory provisions: Part 5, conservation of property of historical heritage value or interest, establishes procedures for designing individual for designated individual properties. While while this text understandably focuses on structures, reader is reminded that the designation can also include landscape, trees, parks, and architectural sites. Alteration of designated property cannot be altered without the written consent, and demolition of any property of structures on the demolition of any building or property on any structure on the property requires also a similar consent. Also, the Part 5 of the Heritage Conservation Districts sets out procedures for designating one or more areas as Heritage Conservation District and can incorporate such changes to the official official plan. So essentially, there are two basic parts. There's a conservation of property of cultural value, which is the Part 4, and there's Part 5, which is Heritage Conservation District, which essentially has procedure for designating areas as a conservation district. heritage easement agreement. Harrison should occasionally encounter heritage easements that are voluntarily entered into with the property owners to ensure that heritage properties are protected over the long term. For example, municipalities may require such an agreement as a condition when funding the restoration of the structure. For example, heritage may require that such agreement or condition when it's funding the restoration of a structure more more often. The incentive to enter into such an agreement involves tax relief. So there is a heritage property tax relief which ranges from 10 to 40% of the tax levied on the eligible property. So essentially, to recap, the registrant will occasionally encounter heritage easement that are voluntarily entered with the property owners to ensure that the heritage properties are protected for a long term. For example, municipalities may require such an agreement as a condition when funding the restoration of a structure. More often, the incentive to enter into such an agreement involves tax relief. Now, coming to the next item of power of sale, the two power of sale approaches can be taken up as it was in the Mortgage Act. There is one contractual power of sale pursuant to the appropriate clause contained in the mortgage document, and a statutory power of sale under the Mortgage Act. Power of sale is a legal right of the mortgagee to foresee sale of a property without judicial proceedings should a default occur. This power of sale is more frequently used method by which mortgagee remedies a default by a mortgagor. Power of sale can often be the fairest, most inexpensive method to deal with the present financial circumstance. The power of sale allows the mortgagee to retrieve only what she is entitled to and no more. If a surplus occurs, then the owner or mortgagor will benefit. Power of sale does not involve certain complexities, particularly the gaining of power sale does involve certain complexities, like particularly the gaining of possession and obligation of the mortgagee to obtain the best possible value. Listing or listing or selling procedures. A notice of sale must be provided to the mortgagor, together with subsequent encumbrances and others having an interest in the property. A prescribed notice under the Mortgage Act can be sent 15 days following the default. The notice can be sent by registered mail or delivered by a personal note service. If a contractual power of sale is undertaken, a mortgagor has 35 days to remedy a situation. If the power of sale is statutory, the time period is 45 days. No action can be taken by the mortgagee within 45 days redemption period. If the time limit has expired and the default is not corrected, then mortgagee can proceed to sell the property. The steps required to effect power sale has been judicially determined as statutory preserved. A certificate of power of sale has been developed by Ontario Real Estate Association to verify certain matters in the listing of property under the power of sale action. A signed copy of this form should be sent filled with the listing authority in the listing brokerage. So essentially, there are two forms. There's a certificate for power of sale that must be used along with the to recap, uh, initially, when the mortgage default occurs, a notice of sale is sent. A mortgage has 35 to 45 days to remedy, and after 45 days, or 35 or 45 days, certificate of power of sale is issued. Essentially, after a certificate of power of sale, then the listing agent is allowed to market the property, and also as a part of as a part, it should involve reasonable time, widest possible coverage, and should involve an arm length transaction. Sellers selling under the power of sale should use ORA form 106 in conjunction with agreement of purchase and sale form 100. Sellers is selling the property as is and without guarantee of inclusion of or chattels or fixtures. Note that the form 106 should be used in conjunction with form 100. Title related problems or disputes. Most residential transactions involving registered registered subdivision plans and relatively straightforward title issues. Most residential transactions involve registered subdivision plans and relatively straightforward title issues. However, registrants can encounter complex situations requiring close scrutiny and appropriate action. So, a couple of areas to consider is roadway access, highway access, fences, shore road allowances, and shoreline ownership. Road access. So access arrangement can prove challenging. Optimally, the property is served by year-round publicly maintained road. However, seasonally maintained roads limit access in sparsely settled areas during the winter months. So, year-round or seasonally publicly managed road and versus a private access road, so where deeded or undeeded are the various options. And even if they are, it might involve a vague description, maintenance, and also specific rights. So, Road Access Act, enacted in 1978, gave a new meaning to the implied grants and the right of way by necessity. Such a right of way involves the indispensable or imperative requirement to have access to otherwise landlocked property. In case of cottage, the right of access to the property might be across a farm field that is subsequently barricaded by the farm owner. Since right of access is implied, the the servient tenement, the owner of the farm, cannot arbitrarily frustrate that right. Otherwise, he or she might fall under the provisions of the Road Access Act. Under this act, access road is essentially a road that has not been dedicated or accepted by municipality, but nevertheless constitutes a thoroughfare by a motor vehicle to one or more parcel of land. Such road can only be closed by a judge's order or a specific written instruction of all parties affected. However, they can be temporarily closed for repair purpose or once per calendar year for 24-hour period. The act is designated to stave off certain action by the owner to detriment of the other parties currently using the access route. The court have empowered to evacuate the necessary the necessity of such a barricade, the existence of alternate access point, and other remedies. In fact, the court is authorized to fine the individual and order that person to remove the barrier or other obstacles. From a real estate perspective, um, the resident should know that the Road Access Act cannot be viewed as an immediate solution to all form of vague access situations or erratic situations by either user or owner. Access problems rate as highly as fine line disputes in terms of frustration and legal complexities. The issue of road access is anything but is not straightforward. Residents may encounter a wide range of possibilities, including publicly maintained year-round, seasonally open and road launches, trespass roads, or privately deeded or undeeded right of way. In northern area, residents may also encounter roads constructed on the crown land by Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Brokers say personal caution against regarding such matters. Access clause. So essentially, in the access clause, the buyer is seeking the right of way. Buyer wants to confirm the public road. Seller provides the written assurance. Buyer acknowledges that the road is not publicly maintained. There could be unregistered easement, water access only, or there could be fluctuating water levels. Highway access. Public Transport and Highway Improvement Act, um, administered by Ministry of Transport, impacts the use of abutting adjacent land in relation to the highway. From a real estate perspective, permits is issued by the ministry. Permission by the ministry is required for various entities for like various activities like placing, erecting, or altering a building, fences, gasoline pumps, trees, shrubs, signs near highways. Developers with the land development proposal may request public transport and highway improvement act permits if it falls under the highway corridor control area. I'm sorry. Fences. Next to access of the fences are not really have the most common dispute between the neighbors. The Line Fence Act provides that the landowner may build a fence or mark his or property boundary and is entitled to construct the fence on the property line. The Act provides a method for municipalities to settle disputes solely based regarding the line fences. In other words, the fence must be on the property line. Interestingly, if the property owner builds a fence within his or property that's 3 inches inside, this act does not apply. The Alliance Fence Act offence is generally considered as any barrier enclosing or bordering a property. The purpose of a line fence act is to provide to provide procedure for the resolution of line fence disputes between owners and adjoining properties. The council of the council of each municipality appoints a number of fence viewers to carry out the provisions of the act. Fence viewers are paid remuneration based on the hourly or daily rate or a rate based on each attendance regarding the specific matter. Fence viewers may address disputes regarding fences within the municipality and fences on the boundary between the municipalities or fences between the municipality and an organized territory that does not have a municipal organization like portion of the Ontario. Fence construction: the owner is permitted to construct and maintain a fence to mark the boundary between his or her land and adjacent land. In the case of new construction or restoration or maintenance, the owner may request the municipality to assist in arbitrating what cost should be incurred by each owner affected by the existing or proposed fence. The fence viewers will examine the land and in some instances hear evidence or examine testimony of the owners on their of their witness under oath. An award is made that specifies the location of the fence, designation of one half the fence that will be maintained by each owner, or such arrangement as appear appropriate, description of the materials to be used in the construction and restoration and maintenance activity, the date of completion and the cost of proceedings to be paid by each owner. If a bylaw pursuant to the municipal act has been passed in regards to the height and other regulations regarding the fences, the description in that award must confirm with such requirements. An owner is dissatisfied with the award may appeal to the referee whose decision is final. Municipal fence bylaws. Individual municipalities may have detailed procedures relating to division or line fences, including a prescribed method to arrive at an agreement with neighbors regarding fence construction method to use in sharing cost, and the mediation and arbitration procedures should a dispute arise. Further, such bylaws set out high requirement for the division fences around pools and temporary fence requirement. The bylaw will also typically outline acceptable construction method, acceptable permissible type of material to be used, and special consideration. Shoreline allowances. Shore roads allowances are established in the various parts of Ontario adjacent to the navigable rivers. The initial layout of the road allowance in Ontario included the establishment of a shore road allowance that was 66 feet in width adjacent to navigable rivers and shores of lakes. Such roads, although infrequently open, were intended to provide access to commercial and public passage. The fact that such allowances may never have been open in no way limits the original conveyance or obstructs the right of use by the public. A typical reference plan includes this. A township surveyed prior to 1850 might do not contain these road allowances. Following that date, almost property near water are surveyed in a manner to create public road at the water's edge. The existence of shore water allowance will normally appear in the deed, saying that and say except the portion of land consisting of 66 feet shoreline road allowance. Encroachment. The real issue for cottage owner is the fact that the waterfront lots may have boathouses, docks, and cottages constructed on the shore road allowance and therefore are built on land not owned by the seller. As such, survey prepared by an Ontario Land Survey is critical. Closing. When the municipalities are empowered under the Municipal Act to affect closing of shore road allowance and resolve title issues, objection filed from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry have directly impacted such decisions, given the MNR mandate to protect public lands and associated natural habitat in and around watercourses within the province. Although, according to MNR, has established certain guidelines and will generally encourage municipalities to retain shorelines where the land contributes to the preservation of fish and wildlife habitat. Addressing unique circumstances. For example, non-conforming status, cost of individual application, diminished frontage required, and fish habitat considerations. Shoreline ownership. Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry policies can impact ownership of shoreline properties in Ontario. Over the years, many property owners have inadvertently encroached on the crown land when they improve cottages or lakeshore fronts. The MNR has obtained new surveys for many of these shorelines. The owners by encroaching the crown land, the owners are approached to either purchase or lease the crown land affected. Property rights associated with the waterfront can be complex. Unique rights and responsibilities are involved. As such property boundaries, body ungranted crown lands According to the MNR, approximately 87% of the Ontario land base, including land under navigable rights owned by the Crown. All Crown land are managed by the Ministry under the authority of the Public Lands Act. The bed of navigable water bodies are usually Crown lands and therefore also managed by MNR under the Bed of Navigable Waters Act. Owners of the land bordering the shores of navigable lake may have certain rights. Riparian rights are associated with access to the water as opposed to the ownership of the bed of the lake or river. So to recap, rights under the agreement are generally assignable subject to some exceptions, but liabilities are not assignable. Residential Tenancy Act may resident tenant may assign or sublet in accordance with the Residential Tenancy Act. Provisions in the residential insurance policy can be grouped under four headings: property insurance, liability insurance, and endorsement conditions. Buyers contemplating the purchase of old residential properties containing outdated system may experience difficulties or at premium when arranging insurance. Internal extent changes to the heritage designated under the Heritage Act are typically restricted. Two power of sale approaches are available. One is on contractual, the other one is statutory. Mortgagee must ensure the property is actually promoted in the marketplace in order to obtain fair market value. Access arrangements, particularly in rural areas, can result in problems and possible litigation. Exercise caution regarding seasonal publicly maintained roads, private access roads, and accessibility for or related limitations for properties adjacent to highways and secondary roads. Access to highways as defined under the Public Highways by Transportation and Highway Improvement Act provides an appropriate permit used by Ministry of Transportation. The Line Access Act only applies to disputes involving fences located on the boundary line. Municipalities establish fence by law to control fence construction and appearance, including height. Be aware that properties abutting navigable waterways may be subject to shore alliances. Alteration of shorelines can result in sale delay and or cancellation. I think with this we are done with chapter 9, contractual and title related problems. Thanks for your time.